Well, we've all heard about the Scott Peterson case, but let me ask you a question. What if we got it all wrong? Well, hello and welcome to another Charlie Crime Investigates. We're looking today at one of the most talked about murder cases in history. At Christmas 2002, a family was getting ready to celebrate the season with special joy, in that a new child was on the way to the Peterson household. That joy, unfortunately, was replaced with fear, anguish, and mystery. Investigators were pulled away from their own families on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. A beautiful 26-year-old pregnant woman was missing. Yes, it was all hands on deck to find her. And at a time when news was normally slow, well, this case caught fire. And the media, they were broadcasting the incident across the nation and even abroad. Yes, this case had all the markings of a mystery movie, and even turns that no one expected. I'm Charlie, and this is Charlie Investigates.
The views and opinions expressed in this presentation are solely those of the individuals participating and do not represent those of city, county, state, or federal law enforcement agencies, nor sponsors and platforms of this presentation. The Charlie Crimebuster name and all forms and abbreviations are property of its owner, and its use does not imply endorsement of or opposition to any specific organization, product, or service. All individuals described or mentioned in the presentation should be considered innocent unless or until found guilty in a court of law. This presentation contains adult subject matter. Listener and viewer discretion is advised.
We will be opening the case file on a 20-year-old case that has already been tried. The subject, Scott Peterson, has already been convicted of the crime. That crime, the murder of Laci, his wife, and manslaughter on his unborn son. We're opening this case to investigate because the Innocent Project has taken on Scott's case. The Innocent Project, well, their chapters combined across the country, well, they have gotten several guilty convictions overturned. The impact by numbers of the Innocent Project shows this: 205 clients exonerated by DNA, 257 total Innocent Project victories. One that is very notable was Kirk Bloodsworth. He was one of the most important figures in the history of wrongful convictions. He was the very first person on the United States death row ever exonerated by DNA evidence. Yes, Kirk's case, well, it reshaped forensic science, eyewitness standards, and post-conviction DNA testing. Well, it really did reshape those laws nationwide. You see, Bloodsworth, he was a 23-year-old former Marine, a Maryland weatherman, when he was wrongfully convicted in 1985 of the rape and murder of 9-year-old Dawn Hamilton in Rosedale, Maryland. He always maintained his innocence, and the Innocent Project worked to make that freedom work for him. However, Scott Peterson and his case, well, that case has not been overturned. And in fact, contrary to what you may have been told through the internet sensationalizing of the news, well, at this point, the Innocent Project basically is trying to find a new court case for our convicted Scott Peterson. They are alleging that the trial violated his civil rights, among other things. In our investigation, we will follow the evidence, just like assigned investigators did, and we'll look at new evidence that's been brought forth publicly with the Innocent Project, the Los Angeles Innocent Project, that is. You see, the Los Angeles Innocent Project is an independent chapter. It's not the same Innocent Project that you read about in New York. In fact, New York has been, for some time now, telling people, no, we did not open that case. It was one of our chapters, the Los Angeles chapter, that is. Now, we're also, after we come back to the investigation, we're going to see if the new evidence from the Innocent Project, well, we're going to see whether that had already been investigated and covered in the first case. Now, I have to tell you, many people who believed that Scott was guilty 20-some-odd years ago, well, they're not as certain today. There are some of folks who feel that, well, that they were not given the full truth of the case, while others believe investigators and others may have let confirmation bias shape the investigation. Well, let me remind you, as a thorough investigator, we also, you and I, we're going to have to guard against bias confirmation about the new evidence as well. In other words, we got to go where the evidence takes us, even with the new evidence. Yes, we will investigate the claims of the Innocent Project. We will tackle the tough questions. Questions like, why after all these years is the Innocent Project pursuing this case? Questions like, what if the new evidence could get him a do-over trial? We will also investigate the investigation, and we will ask the tough question. Was there a discovery violation? Was there a rush to judgment? Were other theories ignored by the investigators? And was there confirmation bias? And then we're going to think about what is different about the media today versus the media during the case. As you see, there's a whole lot of investigation going on. Hey, do me a favor. If you like this kind of reporting, following the evidence rather than theories and feelings, please like, subscribe, and review. This way, we can reach more people with the investigation, and you can be notified every time we drop an episode. And by the way, we're grateful to have you on the Charlie Crime Train today, and we're also grateful for our sponsor that stands behind those men who run toward danger, men and women, by the way, who run toward danger instead of away from danger.
The following podcast is brought to you by PeacemakerNetwork.com. PeacemakerNetwork.com. Audio is provided by Pixabay.com. That's Pixabay.com.
Now, before we get into the new evidence from the Innocent Project, we're going to take a look at last week's podcast by taking just a peek at our evidence locker. In our evidence locker from last week's episode, we want to look at some of the things that we placed in there. Number one, we're going to look from our evidence locker at the statement of Karen Sarvis. Sarvis stated that approximately 10:18 on Christmas Eve, she saw the Peterson's dog, Mackenzie, in the front yard, with a leash still attached. She then placed the dog into the backyard of the Peterson's residence. Now, our ECS, that is our evidence confidence scale, well, on our scale, we are going to rate that as confirmed. Yep, confirmed. As we stated last week, she did not have reason to bring this forth other than being a good neighbor. Also, this is confirmed by using a grocery receipt that she got shortly after she left the Peterson's residence. You see, that grocery receipt becomes a reference point. She could go back and be more exact about the time. And third, we do know that Scott confirmed seeing Mackenzie with the leash still on the dog in the backyard when he returned later that afternoon into the early evening. This is actually confirmed and supported by multiple reliable sources and even on the official record. So it is confirmed. It is a confirmed timeline anchor. And my friend, I got to tell you, it really impacts this case, as you're going to see, in a huge way. The second thing we're pulling out of the evidence locker from last week's episode is a statement of Scott Peterson about when he arrived at the Berkeley Marina. This is also evaluated on our evidence confidence scale, ECS, as confirmed. And that is backed by a marina parking receipt. and several seeing Scott there at that marina. So that one is confirmed. And the December 23rd, the day before Christmas Eve, the trip that Scott and Laci took to the hair salon, that was Laci's sister's hair salon, is also confirmed. And, of course, they stopped for pizza. Scott ate the leftovers the next day. And then there was the call from Laci to her mom about 8:30 p.m. That's also confirmed by phone records and her mother's statement. Now, there's another thing we're going to pull out of the evidence locker, and that was the fact that Scott stated that he was fishing from the boat. We are going to have to, at this point in the investigation, mark that one as uncertain. Uncertain. There is conflicting evidence, and there are unresolved questions. You see, there was no one that really saw Scott fishing from his boat. They saw him with the boat, but no one reportedly saw him actually fishing. He was seen launching the boat and taking his boat out and into the water and taking it out of the water, but no one reported in the case actually seeing him actually participating in fishing while on that boat. Also, an early observation of the boat and fishing gear, well, that fishing gear that he had did not reveal saltwater fishing tackle. So, at this point, we're going to have to say the fishing is not confirmed. Now, that's not to say he was not fishing. We just can't say that he was as well, so that is unconfirmed. He was also vague about the kind of fish he was fishing for in his statements. He was not there in the water very long, and again, that fishing gear did not support that he was fishing on the trip. So that one, the ECS, is uncertain. The next thing we're pulling out of the evidence locker from last week's episode was the statement where he said they were watching Martha Stewart on the TV on the morning of Christmas Eve. At this point in the investigation, we're going to assign that one as plausible. Plausible. You see, this is a reasonable interpretation in that Martha Stewart was on TV at that time of the day. We're still going to need to follow up to see if that's the exact segment that matched the statement of Scott. So it is plausible. Okay, now that we have run our ECS, evidence confidence scale, let's put those back into the evidence locker. Now, we may adjust those, again, as the evidence continues. But there is new evidence now that we're going to put into the locker. We're taking the new evidence out. We're going to look at the new evidence, and we're going to put it in the evidence locker. Then we're going to come back to the real investigation that took place. Well, we're going to see if the new evidence claims by the Innocent Project was actually covered with the investigation that's already concluded. So it's going to be really interesting to take this new evidence and then put it beside the old investigation. All right, please note that our information now on this new evidence, it's coming directly from things that court records and notes that are tied to the case. We're not just going by what someone said. Someone said this, someone said that. No speculation. This is an investigation. We're examining the court papers filed by the Los Angeles Innocent Project, the LAIP. And there are several items included. So here's item number 1 that we're going to take and put in our evidence locker, and that is the burglary that occurred across the street from the Petersons' home during Christmas week. Now, I got to tell you, this is one of the most debated issues in the Scott Peterson case. It does involve a burglary at the house of Larry and Martha Medina, who lived across the street from Scott and Laci Peterson. Now, the Medina family was away for Christmas holiday when burglars entered their home, stole a safe that contained jewelry, guns, and other valuables. Now, police did eventually identify and arrest the 2 men for the burglary. Those 2 guys was Donald Pierce and Stephen Todd. Both of those people involved in the burglary denied any involvement whatsoever in Laci Peterson. And the real controversy in this whole thing well, it actually centers on when the burglary occurred. He sees not if it occurred, not who did it, but the real thing in this case is when did it occur? Now, we do know that according to the Medina testimony, they left their home at approximately 10:30 to 10:32 a.m. on Tuesday the 24th. Now, also I could say that even before we put this in the evidence locker, we can confirm that time. They were leaving at 10:30 to 10:32, December 24th, to travel to Southern California to visit family for Christmas. Susan Medina's testimony is also linked to a cell phone call that she made to her son as they were driving away from the house. And that is a timeline benchmark that we can place their departure at around 10:32 a.m. It's another thing that we call the timeline anchor. That anchors the timeline that they left at 10:32 a.m. Keep that in mind. Put that down in your investigator notebook because that's important. Now, they returned home approximately at 4:30 p.m. on Thursday, December the 26th, 2002. They then discovered that their house had been burglarized, run across to where the police were already on the Peterson's lawn, and they told them about the burglary. Now, as I've said consistently, timelines are critical. You see, the LAIP, the Los Angeles Innocence Project, they're saying that the burglary of the Medina residence in their filings has greater significance even, than the investigators concluded. They are arguing that witnesses reported activity inconsistent with the prosecution timeline. They're arguing that the burglary may have occurred earlier than investigators concluded. And the investigators, they're arguing, failed to fully pursue whether this burglary had any connection to Laci's disappearance. There's an old saying in investigation that there's no such thing as a coincidence. You have the disappearance of Laci Peterson, and then just across the street you have a burglary. No such thing as coincidence. But my friend, no such thing as a coincidence. Well, I got to tell you, that's not evidence. That's not evidence that it's a coincidence. But why the LAIP is saying it matters is this, and this is important. If the burglary occurred while Laci was allegedly walking Mackenzie, the Los Angeles Innocence Project is arguing it could support an alternative sequence of events. In other words, it does not face the timeline of the investigation if that burglary occurred while Laci was allegedly walking Mackenzie. So there is the claim. Well, now for now, we're going to take this, we're going to put it into the evidence locker number one. Evidence locker number one, the burglary. We're going to pull it out when we return to the investigation, and we're going to see exactly how the investigators handled this part of the investigation. And, I would also be interested in hearing your take, you that have followed this case. What do you think about that burglary? What do you think about it? Do you think that the two crimes are actually intertwined, or do you think it was just two separate crimes whatsoever? What's your thinking? Reach out with a shout out. You can reach me, charliecrimebuster at gmail.com, charliecrimebuster at gmail.com. All right, so let's go to the second claim. Both of these are very, very important claims, by the way. This is what we're going to put in evidence locker number two, and that is eyewitness sightings of Laci walking the dog. Now, the LAIP position is that multiple witnesses reported seeing a pregnant woman believed to be Laci after Scott had left the home. They are arguing that these reports deserved greater investigative weight than the original investigation gave it. Now, what did the LAIP tell the court? Well, the petition argues that the investigators received multiple independent reports from witnesses who believed they saw Laci Peterson walking Mackenzie after Scott had left for work. Now, according to the LAIP, these reports were either in that earlier investigation discounted, inadequately investigated, or interpreted through the lens of the prosecution's developing theory. They contend that these sightings, when viewed alongside of other evidence that they deserve renewed consideration. Follow the evidence. Within the first week after Laci disappeared, at least 12 people had contacted the police saying they believed that they saw Laci walking McKenzie on the morning of December the 24th. Now, as the investigation continued, 20 people reported seeing either Laci or a pregnant woman matching her description walking a dog that day. We do know that of that 20, some are duplicates. But this is something to really develop after we put it in evidence locker number 1. But here's the question I want you to think about. With all these witnesses calling in and reporting seeing a pregnant lady walking her dog, why was it? Why was it in the trial? Now think about this. Why was it in the trial that neither the defense nor the prosecution called a single one of these witnesses to the stand? If they saw Laci walking their dog, why didn't someone put these witnesses on the stand? Now, both the prosecution and the defense told the jury in the opening statements they expected eyewitness testimony about Laci being seen alive on December the 24th. And in the end, neither side called a single witness to testify to that effect. Why do you think that is? Again, reach out with shout out, charliecrimebuster@gmail.com, charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. As you can see, my friend, these are very, very important things that are happening. Now, how much weight did the LAIP put on this? Well, very little, really. You see, the LAIP did not argue that these witnesses prove that Scott is innocent. Instead, they argued these witnesses are consistent, again, with an alternative timeline that deserve more consideration. The bottom line, my friend, is that if Laci was alive after Scott left this morning, it pretty well gets him off the hook for this murder charge. So this is really important. 2 claims we're putting in the evidence locker. Both of them are extremely large claims. Now we're going to return to this new evidence that the LAIP has put before the court in a moment. But right now, we just need to pause and take a quick moment and share with you Charlie Crimebuster's Crazy Crook of the Week. Our Crazy Crook story today comes from, another Florida one, Hialeah, Florida. It involved a 26-year-old man who allegedly climbed into the back of a landscaping van to steal tools. While he was inside, you can't make this up, the landscaper locked the van, walked away to work, not realizing anyone was in it. A few minutes later, the neighbors heard someone yelling, "Help me, I'm inside!" And the would-be thief, he was trapped in the van he was trying to burglarize. The workers wisely left the doors locked until officers arrived, because the van did contain tools, including some weapons. Well, when the police got him out, he claimed he wasn't stealing anything. No. He had just jumped into the van because a dog was chasing him. The dog chased him. But unfortunately for him, ring camera footage showed him driving up, getting out of his own car, and climbing into the van before becoming trapped. Yeah, he was arrested on burglary-related charges. Well, sometimes the hardest part of the investigation is simply opening the van door, isn't it? But it's not really hard to understand this fact that these crooks are really crazy. So the guy that got locked into the van is indeed Charlie Crimebuster's Crazy Crook of the Week. Now, what's really eerie about this is that this Crazy Crook story goes right along with the next thing that we're going to put in the evidence locker. And it is another big one, I can assure you. But it relates to the Crazy Crook story. Can you guess what that is? And by the way, please do reach out with a shout out. Tell me about these first 2 claims that we've covered on today's podcast. What do you think? This idea that there were witnesses, this idea that there was a burglary. Are you thinking different today than you thought during the trial of Scott Peterson if you were alive during those days? We'd love to hear from you. Reach out with a shout out, charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Now, there are a whole lot of podcasts out there today that's talking about this new evidence, but they're not really putting it down in the order that I feel that it should be presented. They're really going on clickbait rather than anything else. So we're going to give you the real facts. And so some of you are maybe asking, well, we know that this was filed some time ago. What's the present status of these filings? And remember, we still have, well, at least 6 other claims to go over before we get back to the original investigation. But let me tell you where we are. As of today, the litigation is still active. Although the Los Angeles Innocent Project, they did, I got to tell you, suffer a significant setback earlier this year. Its current status is that in April 2026, there in the Superior Court, this is California, of course, Judge Elizabeth Hill denied Scott Peterson's petition. The judge rejected all 14 claims, finding that the purported new evidence did not warrant overturning the conviction, and that much of it was procedurally barred and not truly new, or that it was inadmissible or unlikely to change the verdict. That's from ABC News. But the Los Angeles Innocent Project immediately announced then that it would appeal the ruling to a higher California court. They contend that the trial court refused to fully consider the evidence that they believe supports Peterson's claim of actual innocence. Now, I do need to tell you also that it's a well-known fact that a lot of the appellate court judges are elected, meaning that they have to face election and they have to face the people. We do know that at one time, the public's interpretation of this case was that Scott was guilty, no doubt about it. He was the most hated man in America during the time of his trial. So an appellate judge turning it over could mean that they could actually find themselves not elected during the next time. Not saying that happened, but there is that probability. That's why oftentimes you'll see the appeals in the lower courts. The appeals will not work that the defense will bring to the court. They will not get relief. But then when it's kicked to the higher courts, those courts where the judges are not elected but rather appointed, then those particular ones, sometimes the defense will get some traction. What do you think? This is not over yet. No, it's not over yet. And these claims are very, very important and critical. So I'm not telling you how I believe about this, because I'm not trying to believe one way or the other. I'm simply trying to follow the evidence. And that's what we want you to do. Follow the evidence. We already have 2 big claims in the evidence locker. The eyewitnesses, the burglary. They're very important. Very important. The whole case can rest on this because, again, if Laci Peterson, I can't say this enough, if she was alive after Scott Peterson left his house that day, well, there's no way that he could do it. We have him hemmed in on his timeline. We know exactly pretty well where he is almost all the time, through drive time, receipts, drive back, drop off the boat, get back to the house. All that he's squeezed into the timeline to where there's no way that if she was alive after he left that day, there is no way that he could have killed her and then disposed of her body. There's just no way that could happen. So it is important. These 2 claims are very, very important. Now, again, once we get through the new evidence, we're going to go back to the old investigation, and then we're going to see, did they investigate these new things that we're looking at? And did they investigate it correctly? We're going to look at that when we return with Charlie Crimebuster. Well, thank you for being a part of the program today. Boy, this investigation is just getting going. I thought it would be a 4-part series, but there's going to be much, much more, because at Charlie Crimebuster, we just don't glance at something. We just don't summarize something. We just don't take it and run with it and try to get clicks. What we try to do is lay out the investigation like an investigator should, so you're going to get deep dives from us. You're going to get really material as you follow this case. Next week, we're going to go and continue to put things in the evidence locker relating to the new evidence. So until this time, next time, this is Charlie Crimebuster reminding you, be safe, be alert. For the life you save, it may be your very own.
If you or someone you know is a victim of domestic violence, please call 1-800-799-7233. 1-800-799-7233. You've been listening to Charlie Crimebuster Investigates, and you can find more Charlie Crimebuster Investigate true crime podcasts on your favorite podcast platforms. We would like to thank our hosting service, Libsyn.com. We would also like to thank our sponsor, the Peacemaker Network, and encourage you to support the first responders, military, and law enforcement personnel by contributing to the Peacemaker Network. That's peacemakernetwork.com. All music and sound effects are courtesy of Pixabay.com. You can also support us by subscribing to our YouTube channel, tag @CharlieCrimebuster, and then click the subscribe button. By doing so, you'll be notified each time we drop one of our shows. Another more convenient way for you to listen to our podcasts are for you to say to your smart speaker, play Charlie Crimebuster. If you have comments or suggestions, we would love to hear from you, so please send them to charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Or you can call or text us 407-917-2211. That's 407-917-2211. On behalf of Charlie Crimebuster and Donnie Cantwell, I'm James Buckland. Thank you for listening, and we hope that you will join us again for another exciting crime episode with Charlie Crimebuster Investigates.